The road to this day has had a few twists and turns, hasn't it? In a weird way, it all makes sense though, doesn't it? This was a phrase I wrote when I purchased my copy of Sonic Frontiers on launch day. Now, I was quoting a scene from How I Met Your Mother here, but to say the 5-year road to Sonic Frontiers release had just a few twists and turns is to be a bit of an understatement. It was a ride, especially in the year and a half up to its release. I saw the vague Sonic Central teaser, I sat up until 20 past 2 in the morning to watch the Game Awards trailer, I witnessed the fandom lose hope again when early gameplay was shown mixed with the awkward marketing. But I remained quietly hopeful until it arrived. And yeah, I loved it. My first 3 hours of Sonic Frontiers felt like a breath of fresh air. The mystery, the exploration, there's so much to uncover within my 23 or so hours of playtime, from the first area to the final boss. So here's how it went down. The main part I was hoping for with the open areas was for it to be fun to traverse and explore without focusing on the main objectives. And for the most part, it nailed that for me, especially during Ares Island. I do think it could be a bit more spacious, not AAA size, but a bit larger to allow for more exploration and replayability later on. There's such a crazy amount of stuff to do in terms of placement of rings, springs, and rails. The placements are a bit scattery, but the energy of going all over the place makes up for it. The way Sonic handles is fine. He controls slightly better than how he did in Forces, but it's one of those things that gets a bit better later on. After the first island, I mostly had the stats maxed out on the options page, so the movement didn't always feel too stiff. The boost feels fast enough, and getting to 400 rings for the first time and boosting like mad early on was satisfying. Momentum in Sonic has been a debated topic in the community for a while.
I've never heard him use the M word before.
And while it looks smoother with momentum physics modded in, the way he handles here for the most part is acceptable for me. The only parts that seem off are the moments of him stopping on a dime, some occasional stiffness, and rail physics. In addition, you can still get a little bit of momentum through flying up cliffs at a certain angle and performing tricks to get higher to certain areas. I like the puzzles on each island, some easier than others, maybe too easy in some regards. There could have been a bit more variety with them later on though. The story-focused ones like shepherding Cocos or collecting material for Tails were fun and challenging, and I wish there were more like those. The problem I have with them later on is how you can't replay them. That's one big issue which I'll get out of the way, is how there's very little replay value or post-game material for a good percentage of the islands. I like the pinball level, believe it or not, but it can't be re-entered. What if you wanted to get a new high score? There's like not being able to replay the shrines in Breath of the Wild. Speaking of Breath of the Wild, I didn't get too many vibes from it outside the landscapes, Cocos, and the Starfall event that's just the Blood Moon. If anything, some parts reminded me more of Mario Odyssey. Like the islands, mainly Chaos Island, are almost structured like the Sand Kingdom. Big open area with the main tasks, but also having small segments that act like self-contained levels that are kind of reminiscent of earlier games. I mean, when you stomp and jump at the right time, Sonic will gain a little bounce, just like Odyssey's ground pound jump. I mean, to be fair, Mario did take Sonic's rolling ability, so it makes sense for Sonic to steal one of Mario's moves too. There's also a rain cycle, but unlike Zelda, that doesn't really change anything to the gameplay. Nice that temporary rain cycles can be implemented along the day-night cycle, but could add it to the gameplay in some form. The themes are mostly solid, but next time I wouldn't mind them leaning back into some real-world inspiration for locations. Sega seems to be leaning towards 2000s era in terms of inspiration, and the art direction those games were inspired by real-world locations like Africa and San Francisco, so it could be worth revisiting again. The moves you get are fun and the combat is pretty simple, but you can still maintain a sense of strength when pulling off specific combos at the right time. I barely used the parry move unless I really needed to in bosses or those robot dog situations. The drop dash is cool, but it's annoying how you can't steer it like the spin dash in Adventure 2. I wish there was a little more enemy variety for here in the cyberspace levels, but I do like the designs for most of the enemies. The only problem I have is that your moveset does feel a little limited at times. I think Sonic can be capable of a wider range of moves, and even just an extra 6 to 10 could go a long way. It would be cool if maybe there was some legacy moves you could unlock. Maybe there could be a variant of the Ancient Light from Adventure 2 that allows you to destroy multiple enemies at once. What about the Super Pilot? Could be a fun alternative with a spin dash and be a unique way to build up occasional momentum areas. And if the islands were a bit too large for the boost to explore, you could use a Sky Gem from 06 to travel around quicker. Or the Air Dash. Just a simple selection of moves from Sonic's past that could act as post-game unlocks could go a long way. Also, thanks for bringing back parkour. Could have been pushed a little more, but I appreciate it. Fishing with Big the Cat is fun. I do think the later areas could have had a little bit more challenge, All of them just involve pressing the A button at the right time, but they could have shaken it up by having multiple buttons to press at the right time, especially when compared to Kirby and the Forgotten Lands' approach to fishing minigames a few months prior. The stuff you get is pretty fun, but things could get intense. I do love how it's become normalized that big tekka can just appear in random locations without any explanation. Cameos in Adventure 2, an ongoing mission in Secret Rings, Sonic channel artwork, cut cameos from the movie, and now this. Cyberspace levels are easily the weakest part of the game, and not just because of the reused level layouts. For some reason the physics feel really heavy and jumping out enemies isn't as satisfying. They don't feel fully satisfying to play through and lack that sort of adrenaline the rest of the Boost games, even Forces have. I'm not as tired of reused locations as many others, but the fact that Boom games have been the only Sonic games released in the past 10 years to have fully original level themes really speaks volumes. To be fair, the few levels of the original layouts were decent and an obvious step up from Forces. And some of the reused layouts still felt distinctive and not seem like they were being copy-pasted. I honestly didn't know Savannah Citadel, Radical Highway, and Metal Harbor's layouts were present until I saw a comparison video. At the same time though, it's a shame this could be the last thing Sonic Team ever does with the Boost gameplay, and now it's been taken for granted. There have been good elements of the Boost gameplay in the past, but after generations most of those good aspects seem to have been ignored. You can't even drift in this game. Oh wait, you can! And it sucks! The drift is only usable in one level, and can only be performed by hitting a green dash pound that's only present in this level and nowhere else. Let's leave it that way. In addition, the boost feels weirdly nerfed at times. You can't boost into enemies or run on water with it. You know, two of the main aspects of what makes the boost cool in the first place. I thought if you maxed out your speed, you could maybe be able to do it, but no, you can't. As for glitches, I only encountered two minor ones in my playthrough. One instance where I glitched out of bounds mid-combat, and another involved this rail on Ares Island that, when boosted on, would send Sonic flying the wrong way. Also there's that dumb issue where Sonic falls with his running animation that Forces and I think even Lost World had. Now I am playing this on Switch, and this version runs mostly well. There is a bit of a graphical downgrade, but for the most part the visuals do seem decent despite the pop-in and looking leaks better on other consoles. I know this isn't fair, but it's kinda like when a HD 7th-gen game like Modern Warfare or Web of Shadows got a Wii port. In those cases it's near identical and the exact same experience as the main version, just a little less pretty. Not saying Sonic Frontiers on Switch is graphically like a Wii game, but that's about the best comparison I could think of. Also, the Lords have blessed us, and you can screen record on the Switch version. Something Forces lacked so badly I pointed out in my YTP of it. Which is beneficial since it allowed me to record most of the footage you've been seeing in this video. As you can see, I've come a long way since the recording setup for my Sonic Lost World 3DS review. Something worth noting is the file size. The Switch version of Frontiers is reportedly 10GB, while other versions appear to be 24. However, I got the physical copy, and it only took about 96MB when I began playing it. Then a few hours of playing later and it bounced up to 104. And it remained that way up until December 9th, 2022, when I updated it to version 1.1.1, when it became 153MB. By comparison, I have Sonic Forces physically, and that takes up 322MB. Though keep in mind a good percentage of that is the Episode Shadow DLC. I might have gotten something wrong here, but it could be evident there might have been some compression issues with optimizing the Switch version, when compared to other physical Switch titles in my library. Well, I just spent an entire paragraph analysing data sizes, but I didn't expect to see that in a Sonic video. Next time, ranking every Sonic game by file size. The game's soundtrack has its moments, even if it's not in my top 10. The main island themes are nice and peaceful. The one jingle that plays during some of the Coco puzzles is also nice to listen to. But the music during the Titan battles? Oh my goodness. Undefeatable is an absolute blast to listen to. Where did they find this unused Metal Gear Rising track from? Find Your Flame and Breakthrough It All also maintained that punk rock energy in the late 2000s era. I wasn't fully sold on them here initially, but listening to it during the final boss got to win me over. Dear Father is a nice little follow-up to Dear My Friend. Vandalize is great too, but the song that plays after beating hard mode, One Way Dream. Titan bosses are incredible. This does feel like the first time since Unleashed that Super Sonic feels powerful, and launching multiple attacks at once was so satisfying. I was so excited at the night one. They really didn't need to go all out, but I'm glad they did. I never had too huge of an issue with them outside of learning to parry and wasting rings. But I'd recommend not leveling up too quickly if you want to get the full experience of each boss. Here's footage of me replaying Supreme with everything but rings maxed out and difficulty set to hard. It's disappointing that you can't replay them after fighting them. Supreme is the only one you can replay since the game auto-loads you to right before the fight after the credits play. The upcoming DLC content does seem to hint at boss replayability, however. So let's finally get to the story. Sonic Frontier's plot was definitely one of the parts I was looking forward to. For one, there was the possibility of me making a white IP of it, and more importantly, Ian Flynn. It wasn't until about a few months ago, before November, that I decided to properly read the IDW run of the Sonic comics. I only made it up to about issue 2 at the time of writing, but to keep my thoughts brief, it's alright. The first couple of issues were a nice follow-up to Forces, and I'll probably be more caught up by the time this video is up, but from what I've seen so far, the characterization is mostly solid, and new characters like Starline and Tangle are fun additions. Ian definitely knows his way around the series, and I can see why fans were campaigning for him to be the main writer for the games. And Sonic Frontier's story is pretty alright. The premise and setup is a unique change of pace for the series, and has some fitting callbacks, backstories, and character interactions. The interactions Sonic has with Tails, Amy, and Knuckles are refreshing along with their dialogue and voices. Everyone here is doing great in the voice acting department. I do think the stuff with the Ancients and the Cocos did feel a little vague to me initially. They revealed that the Chaos Emeralds came from an alien race that has connections to the Chao and Chaos, which I'm a little unsure of. The backstory of the Chaos Emeralds weren't necessary, but it's kind of an alright addition, I guess. I'm glad they acknowledged a lot of events from the past. I didn't think they would be callbacks to Shadow, Unleashed, Riders, and Team Racing all in the same game. Some have criticised the callbacks, and I can understand some parts, like this one reference to Dark Gaia or the Egg Carrier feeling a little too specific, but at the same time they don't feel too frequent. A good amount of them you'll only find rarely during your initial playthrough. They can remind me of this one line from Black Knight where you fight a dragon and Sonic makes a callback to the Final Hazard. While some of them aren't 100% necessary, it's cool to see Sonic reminisce on his old adventures at least. Especially since this is technically an anniversary game. Kind of. It's also insane how they just casually acknowledge Sticks and Tangles being canon to the main series. I did not expect that. The cutscenes are nicely laid out. As I expected, the pre-rendered ones were made just for the trailers. It's kind of unfortunate this has been a trend for the series since Generations. I do think the cutscenes could add more of that cinematic flair that a lot of the other games' cutscenes have. Not just Unleashed, but even other ones like Secret Rings or Ryder's more expressive look. As is, the in-game ones have some good animations and some nice expressive moments even there. Some of the ones that involve tokens are pretty standard characters standing still and talking. That's part of the norm in open world games at this point. We even caught a brief moment where there was no mouse movement.
I can confirm only 4 were constructed.
Now then, let's do it to it. We're out of time. We've gotta save everyone, everywhere.
Hey, Mario! How come his lips aren't moving when he talks?
Sonic's corruption was a neat concept, but I don't think they get to do enough with it. Like during the Raya Island segment, Sonic's condition is getting worse, but during gameplay he's just the same, but with a different idle animation. Why not have his condition affect the gameplay for this segment? Maybe when you boost for specific periods, Sonic would sometimes trip. Or maybe affect movement for platforming. Sure, it might sound annoying, but if it was just for this specific part when trying to deactivate the towers, it could be a bit of a challenge. There's a part where the characters describe their experience with Cyberspace Area, with Knuckles talking about it being a living nightmare drowning in terrible visions and emotions, and Tails confronting a version of himself that fills his thoughts with fears and anxieties. But we don't really get the chance to see that in full. When Sonic gets corrupted, there could be a part where something like that happens to him. Chip once said that Sonic is too strong to lose himself, but maybe there could be a breaking point here. New character Sage and her interactions with Eggman are alright. They try to have his father-daughter relationship between them, but we don't really get to see a huge amount of it. It's just a lot of back and forth with some occasional development. I like the part where she mentions wanting to meet Orbot and Cubot, and the voice memos enhance how Eggman feels about Sage. But I do think that could have been reflected more in the cutscenes. I like Sage, but I do think they could have done a bit more with her. I mean, they definitely will since she comes back at the end. Imagine if they only reserve her for spin-offs though, that'd be pretty messed up. I mean, fans would be thankful seeing her in a Team Sonic Racing 2 over Zavok, let's be fair. The lead up to Supreme was a little rushed. After Sonic's friends fuse to help Sonic return to form, he has to team up with Eggman. And by team up, I mean Sonic gets 6 of the emeralds by himself, while Eggman finds the last one off screen. The end boss is whatever, a bit of a challenge, but also a tad bit anticlimactic. Especially playing on normal where it's just a quick time. The ending is a little quick, but I do like the perspective they go for with Eggman. I previously said I preferred the more comical side of Eggman, but seeing the side of him, and a few parts of him in the comics, reminded me of what I liked about how he was written in Adventure 2. I do love the epilogue too, it just has a really fun energy. It's still a decent story, and a leap up from the past few years of main storylines, but at the same time it does kind of make me want more, which I guess can be interpreted as a good thing. Like I said, it was a unique change of pace. and there's great dialogue, but I'm not sure if all the mystery elements were fully satisfying for me in the end. Another way I put this on my Sonic Storylines tier list, I'd put it somewhere around the great tier near Heroes and Adventure 1. But maybe I'll get to appreciate the story a little more with time, and if the DLC enhances it. I liked Secret Ring's story when I bet it 6 years ago, but I feel it wasn't until a few months after when I truly began to love it. If you're new here, I made videos to talk about the major Sonic storylines over the years. I still agree with most of what I said in these videos, except for some parts I maybe could have worded better. Like I said, the position of Frontier's story might change with the later DLC releases to have additional story content. I assume it will probably be from the perspective of Tails, Amy, Knuckles, time in cyberspace, since they'll be playable. And that's about everything I wanted to cover in this video. Overall, I enjoyed my time with what I got out of Sonic Frontiers, got my money's worth, and like everyone else has said, I hope it's a true step in the right direction for the franchise. At the same time, it's clear that Sonic Team is still limited in its resources and what it wants to mostly achieve. It wants to feel like a AAA game, but it'll feel more like a AAA game with the third A being lowercase. From what I heard, the dev team mostly consisted of roughly 60 people at the beginning. That's 40 less than what the first Sonic adventure had. I'm unsure of how much that number increased as time went on, and it's impressive they are still able to pull it off at a smaller amount, but still. At least there are recent reports of hiring being open and higher morale following the positive reception. Plus it's already become one of the fastest selling games in the entire series. And with sake of pushing the brand much more, the film series success means they'll definitely be getting more resources next time round. Also hoping there's some strong fan mods to come out of it. There means some character ones, physics enhancements, and a lot of meme ones. Or even beginning to see some stage mods, with Sonic 06 areas already being ported over. So let's hope more will be on the way. But I also hope there won't be a 5-year gap next time. But even if there is, and there's still great material between now and then, the next game should be worth it. Oh yeah, the first 8 episodes of Sonic Prime came out while I was working on this. Guess I'll say something quick about that.
Sonic Prime on Netflix! Whoa!
Sonic Prime is good. The animation is fluid and the voices are decent. The premise is interesting, even if it reminds me a little too much of Shrek Forever After. Not to mention Sonic Boom had an episode with the exact same setup. But at least in this case, each alternate universe is distinct and not a palette swap. The multiversal locations and designs kinda peaked with the New York City area, since the other locations and variants weren't anything too special. Mainly since we don't get to see them as much. It's a little too reliant on flashbacks in an attempt at a mystery angle, and not every joke lands, though it's clear they're going for a different approach to humour compared to Boom. Maybe they'll go in more detail about it at a later date once the next few batches of episodes are available, but for now it's alright. Maybe I'll make White Piece of Prime and Frontier's story in the future, depending on what projects I want to focus on, or if they're viable enough. And that's about it. It's been just a little over 10 years since my first Sonic game, and I still enjoy the series. My approach to the franchise has radically changed and enhanced over the past few years, through making videos about it, witnessing how the fandom has evolved, and embracing the series. Rephrasing what I said last year, like with any character and franchise that's been around for decades, getting Sonic and what he's supposed to mean right is no easy task. But with the new approach the series has taken across 2022, and how fans have responded to that approach, maybe that task might become a little easier.